Hello, this is Kyle Stallones. We're here today at the Tomball Museum Center in the Oil Camp House with Wheeler Coe Jr. And we're here to talk about his memories about growing up in Tomball. And this is part of the museum's oral history project, recording the recollections of Tomball residents that have shaped and formed the history of this great town in northwest Harris County. You can view this video and others like it on our YouTube page at Tomball Museum. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Coe. We wanted to start out asking you questions. Could you give us your full name, please?
Ernest Wheeler Coe Jr.
And when were you born?
February 11th, 1940.
Where were you born?
Houston, Texas, St. Joe Hospital.
Is that the one downtown?
In the Heights.
Right at the, oh, in the Heights.
I think I was born in the Heights Hospital, not St. Joe.
All right. Good.
No, I believe it was St. Joe. I better back up on that.
All right. St. Joe's, that's the one downtown right by Pierce Elevator?
Yes.
All right. Good. Who were your parents?
Ernest Wheeler Coe Sr. And my mother's name was Agnes Floretta Neal, her maiden name.
And where did y'all live when you started growing up out there?
We lived on Main Street of Tomball at that time. We moved out here. Daddy had worked for Hughes Tool during the war, Howard Hughes bunch, war effort. When we come out here in 44, we were living here when the war was over. He was a welder and pipe fitter. And we had a little business there on Main Street where Dr. Gear's office is now, 1013 West Main.
Ah.
He had bought about 12 lots in there from Mr. Will Holdreef, sold the east half to J.A. Fulton, the guy that had Fulton's Furniture Stores for many years there. But that's we were raised right there.
So did you live for a while in Houston before y'all moved out?
Yeah, just during World War II.
Okay.
Lived in the Heights. I think one of our neighbors was A.J. Floyd Sr.
I wondered about that. Dad said he lived somewhere near A.J. Foyt's
Is that right?
house.
Yeah. I think we were on 26th Street.
26, all right.
They were blocked behind or blocked the other way. I can't remember.
Cool.
I don't really remember that.
Did you know A.J. Foyt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I met him, I met him later on. We were grown. Yeah.
All right. Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I did. One sister.
What's her
Her
name?
name was Peggy. P-E-G-G-Y, Peggy Coe.
And what's her married name?
Her maiden name?
Her married name?
Her married name was McKinney, Peggy McKinney.
Does she live around the area or what?
No, they didn't live here. They lived in Clear Lake City when she passed away. They lived in Florida. Her husband was a engineer, and he worked for Exxon and Shell, and worked on Alaskan pipeline, thermal imaging, worked on the spacesuit after the people burn up, that kind of stuff. So they lived in Florida while they were here, down at NASA, Clear Lake City.
Well, let's go back to your dad. He was working for Hughes Tool. How long did he work there?
I don't know, probably maybe 5 to 6 years.
What did he do after that?
He went in business for himself here in Tomball. He was a welder. We worked around for Tomball company, all the oil companies, in the oil fields. Everybody worked in the oil fields back then.
Yeah.
We were all town. Tomball, a little bitty place. 2-lane streets, deep ditches on each side. Main Street was business district 4 blocks long.
Wasn't much out here.
And
then.
1 block on the east side of Main,
Yeah.
where Hershey's feed store was. I remember going in there in during the war, and the women would buy, all the feed came in cloth sacks, and it'd be prints or stripes or something. They'd take those sacks and make clothes for the girls. And some of them could make shirts for men. But everything went to the war effort. You couldn't buy a rubber tire.
Yeah, I heard that anything you wanted was pretty scarce. You had to have the tickets to buy things. What did y'all call those?
Ration books.
Ah.
I remember those. Yeah, yeah. That's when remember they you see old cars setting up on blocks because they couldn't buy tires for them.
I guess I think I heard also gasoline was pretty scarce.
Yeah, gasoline, coal oil. Yeah, a lot of stuff pretty scarce. It's cheap too, though.
Yeah.
I remember. I think it was like 16 cents a gallon when I was a kid, maybe less. Coal oil, you draw it up in bulk. We were a rural community back then. Saturday was a big day in Tomball. Everybody come to town.
What did they do when they came to town?
Well, the women shop and the men went to pool hall or drank beer somewhere.
I saw a
Mr.
lot
Hirsch's saloon.
I saw a lot of pictures of them hanging out by the post office and some of the other
Oh, yeah.
buildings in town.
Mhm.
Looked like people
Post
visited.
office were right there, just one block from the railroad. And the mail came in from Dallas. And they didn't even stop that sucker. There was a hook out there, and that guy just hanging on that hook. And they'd send Woody over there with that big old cart, and he'd get the mail and bring it back over to the mailbox. And women would sort it out.
You remember who Woody was? What was his name?
Yeah, he was Barham, Woody Barham. He had been in that London school explosion up in East Texas, and it kind of affected his mind. But he was capable of going and getting the mail and bringing it over.
Yeah, I heard a bunch of kids got blown up in that London explosion
Yeah,
at school.
Yeah. He was one of them. Yeah, bad deal.
Yeah. So let's go back in time from your dad's dad. What was his name?
Ian Coe, Edward Norton was his name.
Where did he live?
Well, they lived there in Decker's Prairie. See, we went back to Isaac Decker was my great-great-grandfather, and he came to Texas in 1835. And the impresario was Ben Milam, and he awarded him a league of land on the Colorado River from the state of Coahuila, Mexico. But the Indians run him out of there, and he came off down here in 36.
1836. And I guess, was this part of Stephen F. Austin's grant back then, or do you know?
He came in with the second group of colonists, but it was Stephen F. Austin, but Stephen F. Austin, second group. He tried to get in the first one, and he told them he was a cobbler and a harness maker, and they wanted farmers to settle the land, what Mexico wanted people working with. So in the second group, he told them he was a farmer, and that's why they gave him a league of land, gave him more land. It's on the Colorado River. I got a map of it. Right on the north side of the river is a 1,200-acre tract laid out, and it represented as a town side of Austin, 1,200 acres. When they built the Capitol and built Congress Avenue, when it crossed that river, it went right straight through that piece of land. But there was Comanches pretty bad back then.
Yeah, I read
They would
stories.
kill you.
Yeah. A lot of people out there got killed.
Yeah.
That's a pretty tough country.
Yep. So that's how he ended up down here. Then he made Isaac Decker. He made boots and harness and so forth for the Confederacy. So he had to sign amnesty when it was all over. So Grandpa and them farmed right there in Decker's Prairie. The farmers and ranchers ran cattle in the woods, open range. In fact, we fenced it up in '52.
Did they have cattle brand?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember what the brand was?
His was CO. Uncle Rux's was RUX. And old man Ed Bradigan was EB. He was a neighbor. But they used running irons, and they'd put it on the side, just a piece of iron and shaped in like a J. You heat it. They'd take that iron real hot, and they'd just run it on the side of the cattle. and they'd run it about this big, so you could see it in the woods, or even on the prairie. You know, hell, you could read that brand 50 yards or so.
Do y'all still have any of your branding irons from back then?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
nice.
Sure do.
Yeah.
Yep. Got some of its spurs and so forth. Saddle, great grandpa's old saddle.
So where did Isaac Decker come from?
He came from Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and they drifted over there. I think out of New York. I think his people were loyalists to England, so he got out of the continental United States per se. But now that's considered part of the United States. That time it was considered, I think, Canada.
You know why he came down here to Texas?
Land,
Land.
free land. That's what brought everybody here.
All right. How about the Coes? When did they get down in this neck of the
He
woods?
come to, I think we hit this area around 1850.
And who was that came in?
That was E.H. E.H. Coe.
We had some ancestry sheets here.
Yeah.
May not be entirely correct, but you can correct it.
It's not entirely correct, but it's close. E.H. was Edward Hampton. He was born in Georgia in 1813, it says.
That sound right where he came from?
Yeah. Actually, the Coes, I think, came in the second group of colonists at Jamestown in the second bunch. But there was two brothers, supposedly one went north and one went south. Up in New York, one went to New York.
Did you ever look into what part of Jamestown they settled in? What part of Virginia? It's north of the river or south?
I
or
don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
Don't know. No.
So when the Coes came in, what part of Texas did they come to?
Decker's Prairie.
Deckersburg.
Yeah. And some of them was up in Limestone County, around Groesbeck.
Were they neighbors with the Deckers?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Land joined Decker.
How many acres did like each side of that have?
You know, I'm not sure. They owned land at that time from different tracts from Spring Creek to Pinehurst.
A lot of
And,
land.
and Grandpa had a 100-acre deeded land in the Egypt community. From 1488 and 2978 meet. In fact, he rented a pasture from Champion Paper when they fenced it up. I was 12 years old when they fenced it up. And he rented that Champion Paper company on the 1,400 acres there, and he leased that from them. His 100 acres was actually in the middle of their 14. Raised cotton down there and cattle.
Was that mostly what the Coes did? On
Yeah, they
farming?
farmed, and Grandpa farmed ranched all his life.
How
All the
about,
boys were raised on the farm, and they went off in World War II. You know, scattered them. A bunch of them went in the military and come back, went to work for the oil companies or whatever. And they were Harvard. He was. Grandpa had put him and Ed in the lumber business. They had some timber he cut off over there off of Hardin Store Road area, in Cow Branch. He had a stand of virgin timber there, and he let them cut that, and they started a little lumber mill right there in Decker's Prairie. The mill burnt. Ended up, Harvard had a lumber yard here on Main Street, right across from where we had the welding shop. Where Lawyer's Pharmacy is, that's where he lived.
did that later become Nidix or? Was
Yeah,
it
he
separate?
sold it to Nidec, and then he went in the cement business at Tomball Ready Mix. And up there where your daddy and your uncle did the grain storage business. Right there,
That's right, east of the tracks.
east of the track.
Near near where they have the.
Yeah, Sycamore Street went down in there.
All right.
Yeah, there's a gravel yard there.
I seem to recall they had a scale where they weigh out the trucks.
Right.
And when we were little kids, Dad would let us go down there and they'd weigh us on
Yeah.
that truck scale.
Yeah. I worked for your daddy and Jake at that time. We were in college, high school. We'd store that grain, take it out of the cars into pneumatic conveyors, and they'd store it, and the government would pay them monthly for aerating that grain and so forth. But then they cut the program out. I mean, just, the government would do that. They pull the feet out and run, pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah.
Can't trust the government, son.
I remember seeing that.
Maybe it's the politicians in there.
I remember seeing that old equipment where they had the steel and it had kind of a half moon shape thing that I guess it like a conveyor belt, but it would blow the grain through or suck it through.
Right, yeah.
And,
Pneumatic conveyors, they call
Okay.
it. Work by suction. And we go in them grain cars and with that head, and it went through that hopper, and then it'd blow that stuff up in that building. That's quite a building, that. Your daddy's barn was a half acre under roof, 20,000 square feet.
it was a really long warehouse. I remember.
Yeah,
that.
buddy, it's a big one. I sold it to a guy later, $200,000 on 2 acres.
How'd you get in the real estate business?
My daddy had gotten sick. I was in college, and at that time I was in the military, and they let me out of the service, come back and tend to his little business. When he got back on his feet, I went back to Sam Houston, borrowed me some money and go up there to finish up a degree. Didn't have much longer to go. And we used to hang around there at Jake's office there with Elmer Walling. He was in the real estate business. And Jake had a real estate license. And I asked Jake, your uncle, I said, what you going to do? He said, well, he said, I think about going in the real estate business. I got a broker, a salesman license, but I don't need a broker. He said, why don't you get a broker's license? I said, I can do that. So I did. I got a broker's license while I was going to college. And when I got out, he and I went to the bank. Billy Joe loved us $300, and we went in the real estate business. Didn't nobody tell us we couldn't do it, So we did. And that's how that all got started.
Well, let's back up a little bit. And which schools did you go to here around Tomball?
I went grade 1 through 12 right here.
And
The elementary school was on Cherry Street,
All right.
and the junior high was on Main Street, and the high school. But that burned down in the 60s. And then they built a new high school over here on the Juergens place. Yeah. Ms. Featherston was my first grade teacher. Joe Featherston's grandma.
Yeah. Remember any other teachers you had?
Yeah. Had Ms. Daniels in the 3rd grade, and Mr. Doris in 6th, and Ms. Nolan in the 4th, I think it was, and Mr. Young in high school. Coach Mighty Kane, he was a coach, junior high. Clyde Mason was superintendent at the time.
Remember what Mr. Young taught?
Yeah, he taught us chemistry and that kind of stuff. I think it's biology too. Nice guy. Tall man, had deep voice. He whoop your butt though. Take that ruler to you.
It's a pretty firm discipline. Huh?
Yeah. He and Polly Parker. Polly was an ag teacher. He would beat your. He had a paddle that he'd hone down from a bat, and he'd make you get over. You bend over the desk, and he'd give you 3 licks, and he swung that bat just like Joe DiMaggio, and he'd come up on you and he'd lift you plumb off the floor. 3 licks is all you wanted from him.
Yeah. Did you do ag?
Yeah, an ag.
Did you have an animal?
Oh yeah, we raised. You talk about country. We raised hogs right behind the high school, backed up to a subdivision. We just fenced a little piece of land there between the bus barn and that subdivision, and we raised hogs right there. Them people never, you know, everybody was rural back then. Them people never said nothing about it. Now you couldn't raise hogs here now. They'd run you out of town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember where y'all would show the hogs at?
We took ours up here to the old North Harris County Fairgrounds on Cherry Street.
Tell me about that fair.
Hmm?
Do you remember much about that fair, that fairgrounds?
Oh yeah, that was great, man. They had 13 acres there. It was started by your great grandpa, Mr. Ballard, started it. Your daddy's dad. He was a instigator in it. All the local people, you know, actually did the work around there and worked in concession stands and worked the stock and just run by the company.
What type of rodeos or fairs did they have there?
Oh man, they had a circus, a carnival,
Yeah.
you know, and they had big buildings where the ladies displayed their quilting wares and cake deals and so forth, and big barn for the horses and the cattle and the pigs. It was quite a deal.
About what years?
Big rodeo arena.
About what years did they run that?
It started in the 40s and ended in the 50s. They just, the old ones that started were getting older and the younger people didn't take on to it like they did, so they just wound it down and eventually sold the land. And in fact, we got an old building over at our place in Deckers Prairie that was the office there at that time. It's still standing, there ain't much left to it, but still there. Yeah, that was quite a deal. Big deal, Saturday deal. Old guy named Bo Damath, who was later a county commissioner in Montgomery County, he got married there in that arena in 1950. Married a lady named Dory. And Dory was later Mrs. Texas. She was a pretty woman. I think she's still alive, but Bo's deceased now.
They get married on horses or just out get married on horses?
Horseback.
Horseback?
Horseback, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, cool wedding, huh?
Yeah. Bo had been a rodeo clown, and the Daniels, they ran cattle and all over the country, the woods too, back in the open range days.
I remember the Damath name. Where was their
Yeah.
place at?
Their place was up at 1488 and 149. That's where the home place was. Had several hundred acres there.
How about the Dorys? Where's their family?
I don't know where she came from. Bo ran on to her somewhere.
All right, let's go back to your high school. You have some memories of high school you want to share with us?
Yeah, we had a great time in high school. It was small. We were Class A, but you know, you got to play football, and everybody got to be in everything. You know. In fact, we had a pretty good football team. We we got beaten regional. We went to regional my senior year in 1958. As far as we got. Should have got further.
You remember who y'all were playing back then?
Yeah, we played Katy and Cyfair. People ahead of us had played the Aldine. I mean, played all around.
Who was your coach in high school?
And we had several. A guy named Akins was there, and when we were sophomores, he had a little altercation with, kind of got crossways with some of the people, and they run him off. But he went from here to Gregory, Portland, and he had a grandson named Drew Breeze. Somebody knows him.
Yeah, pretty famous football name.
Yeah, and his son was named Marty Akins. He was quarterback for the University of Texas in the 60s.
I remember that name.
And he won state at Gregory, Portland for years and years and years. And he was really good, but he was extremely tough disciplinarian, and they had some problems, and the school board let him go. But he's a fine coach. Then we had a guy named Charles Barker when I was senior. He had been an assistant for him. He was a good guy. Ellis Kane coached us in junior high, and he was a fine coach. He's still alive.
What'd you do after high school? What'd you do after high school?
I went to University of Texas a while, and then I went in the Air Force, and then I got out, went back to school with Sam, and then me and your great uncle ended up in real estate business.
What'd you do in the Air Force?
I was an illustrator. I worked in the Strategic Air Command. And what I did was draw charts and things, keep up with the man-hour accounting on the sorties and aircraft. Desk jockey.
Where were you based?
I spent most of my time at Berksville in Austin. You start at Lackland. That's where everybody goes to Lackland for basic, and then they send you off to TDY somewhere to learn something, and then they bring you back and put you somewhere. Damn, didn't put me back in Austin. Hell, I signed up in Austin. Sent me back there.
How long were you in the Air Force?
About 2 years.
Tell me about Tomball when you were like elementary school age. How was Tomball back then?
Man, it was great. We grew up here, and we knew everybody in Tomball. It was a small town. And we'd ride our bicycles all over town, and wherever you was at lunch, that's just where you'd eat. You'd be over at the Mahan's house, or over at the Laird's, or over at Ms. Walling's, or, you know. Nobody worried about you. You just played all day. Come home in the evening.
Yeah. I remember the Walling name. There was a lady that was a teacher, Miss Walling. Is that O-U? How you remember how you spell her name?
Well, I don't think this Walling was her.
Oh, okay.
This was W-A-L-L-I-N-G.
Oh, Walling.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They lived over on Hospital Road.
Who were your buddies back then?
Oh, heck, man, we had a lot of good people. Old Leonard Burt's, which you've heard, Burt's Construction. He was in the Canes, Billy Kane, Glenn Sheriff. We all played football together. Haynes, James Haynes, Larry Self. His people were dairy farmers. Most of your uncles were dairy farmers. Your great uncle. Hal, Jake, Bill. Yeah, Tomball was a great place, son. It was just like one big family.
So who were your friends in high school? Some of the same folks, or?
Yeah, same folks. We all went right. Most of us started and went. A lot of them went from grade 1 through 12. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I heard the Shearer name. Where was their place in town?
Glenn's grandmother lived out on where Park Road and 2920 is now, on the north side of the road, right in there. The old Shearer house set back there. And Glenn Duke, he was a good ball player. His grandmother was Mrs. Carroll, W.A. Carroll's sister. She lived down on Cherry Street. And a lot of the boys, you know, their fathers worked for the oil companies, like Tomball. We had several oil companies here, Texaco, Magnolia, Pan American, well as some independents. But it was, couldn't beat it, man. It was a great place to grow up.
You have some memories of the Tomball Oil Camp?
Yeah, you had two camps there. You had upper camp, which was the production people, the people working offices and so forth. And then the lower camp was down on the other side of Willow Creek, west of it. And that was what we called poor boy camp. That's where these little houses were come out. But some of these houses come out of the upper camp too. They had a couple of different sized houses. They were all small, but some were just a little bigger, a couple 100 feet bigger than the other ones, you know. And they are in the 50s. They closed that camp, and that's how all these little houses got into Tomball. They sold those guys those houses real cheap, and they moved them in Tomball. Man, our population swelled big time because there were more people in that camp than there was in Tomball back then.
I was wondering how they moved them. They just have.
They had two steel runners, and then trucks. They put one runners in. They were all up on blocks, so they're easy to move.
Yeah.
They put that thing up. And once you got it up on blocks, you could take it anywhere. Didn't take long.
I guess
Move one.
The roads to Tomball weren't that busy back then.
No.
A lot easier.
No.
We wanted to ask you about this. This is a photo we had here in the oil camp house. I know this was in Louisiana, but was the oil camp here similar to that? Or?
It's similar to that. Mm-hmm. Laid out better, I think. You know, I think Tomball's was a little better, but they had a big hall out there in the old camp. They called it a recreation hall. They had a big kitchen in it where the women could cook and all, and then they had a larger area where you could hold dances. Had a little stage in one end of it, you know, if you had put on plays or musicians or something. Probably had weddings and so forth. And they had a big lake back there where they fished, and they had a small tennis court where people could play tennis. Kept it lighted.
So
It was nice.
how was it laid out? Was it kind of a circle?
It was laid out sort of in a circle, the upper camp was. And then the lower camp was laid out more like in blocks, like a city, you know, streets. But down there in the lower camp, they didn't furnish those. They furnished houses to those people in the production end of the deal, the big shots, so to speak, superintendents and so forth. But those, what we call roustabouts, most of them, they had to just build their own house, or some of them were pretty, you know, that's right after World War II and all, had some pretty crude stuff, you know. I remember Daddy bought an old house out of the oil field. We moved into town, put it there on Main Street, had gas lights in it. We had gas all over the field. And of course we put electric lights in it there, but it was just shotgun house, you know, you come in the front door and go out the back door. You go right down through the house. Walk through one room, through the bedroom, right on out the back.
I guess the gas lights might have worked, but did you ever have any of them burn down or have trouble with
Oh, I don't know, they could have, but
Yeah.
they worked. You know, gas was free. You could just tap a line anywhere you wanted to. Because it wasn't worth nothing. They were flaring it off. That was our street lights, flares. That oil field was something else.
Did they have many wells close into town, or mostly
Had them
out?
all over town.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, Humboldt had a deal with Tomball, an agreement that they could put those wells pretty much anywhere they wanted to, and they gave Tomball free gas. And water too, to start with. When they knew there was houses in here. That's how that come about. Had free gas here for a long, long time, up into the 60s. Mm-hmm. But we had a gas line maintenance fee that the city imposed, so it wasn't exactly free, but the product itself was furnished free to Tomball. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you remember any of the activities they would have out there at the Humboldt camp?
Yeah, they had a baseball field out there. You know, where the people play ball. Damn, nice field. And they owned quite a bit of land there, had a section or so of land, and they'd let those hands run cattle and horses on it. A lot of them had horses and cattle. And, like I say, it was rural community.
So what was one of your most memorable memories growing up around the Tomball area? Or most memorable events?
Events? I don't know. Some had a lot of memorable events. Just, it was just a great place to grow up. It was go anywhere you wanted to. Wasn't no problems. Wasn't no troubles. Wasn't hardly any crime. You know, different times. It's a different country now.
So let's go back to Decker's Prairie area. Are there any Deckers still with that Decker?
I don't
last
think
name?
there's any Deckers in Decker's Prairie now.
Right.
It'd be some descendants, perhaps, but no Deckers that I know of live there.
Mm-hmm.
And Isaac, he had a lot of offspring. He was married 4 times. He had 22 children, 4 sets of twins. And of course, of several different wives, you know. Everybody worked hard then. A lot of the women didn't live too damn long. For one reason or another.
So how did the land get split up out there?
Well, you get too many heirs, just time, you know,
Yeah.
get split up. Families die, and different heirs get it, some sell it, and some keep it.
Mm-hmm. You know how that the subdivisions up in that area started?
Yeah, there's an area up there called Kipling Oaks. That was great-grandpa of E.H. Coe. He had a survey there, I guess from the state of Texas. It was 200 acres, and Harvard ended up with it, inherited it. He developed it in the early 70s. Me and Daddy's cut a track there on Wright Road, and it's called Decker Place. And there's another track west of there. I think they call it something to do with Decker. Decker Estates. It's Decker State, Decker Place. And Harvard cut up another area that he called Coal Country, which is part of his daddy's property. But there's a W.E. Swineley owned 750 acres there. Now it's called Stagecoach Farms. A guy named Charles Brown developed it, most of it. But Mr. Brown had some property up off the north end of Ulrich, and it was developed back in the 70s, 80s, I guess it was.
So one of the houses that was there, you were telling me earlier, was the Tolman house. It ended up out there where Bill Toder lived on 2920.
Yeah.
So that's one of the houses that's still around the area. Do you know roughly when that house was built?
Probably mid-1800s. It's pretty old.
You know some of the other old houses around Tomball that still may be there? You remember any?
Well, your museum here was the Pelot House. It was off of Boudreaux Road. Mr. Heflin's got a fine brick home over there. It's at the corner of Cherry Street and Market in the southwest corner. And of course, Mr. Klein, Mr. A.H. Kiefer, he's got a fine home that's down there at the corner of Pine and Florence. Those 2 houses, probably the best 2 houses in Tomball when I was a kid. They're both still there too. But most of these houses are small homes moved in from the camp, or local people built them. Harvard built quite a few up and down Baker Drive. W.W. Baker tract, W.W. had 120 acres right there on Main Street in Baker Drive, which has all been developed now, you know.
Is that where the post office is part of that land now?
You know where the post office was? Mr. A.B. Klein lived right there,
Ah,
Pine and Maine. He had a big frame house. He had a large family of 9 children. And, you know, he died as a relatively young man in his 50s. He was quite an entrepreneur. He had a lot of stuff going on for a man that young. Funeral homes, feed stores, feed mills, chicken farm, and dry goods store. And I think he had interest in other businesses around, but a silent interest in it. You would have known he was involved in it, you know, but he probably was the money behind it.
mm-hmm. So did you do any farming or ranching or dairying yourself?
Do I?
Did you, or have you?
I still run cattle on Ducker's Prairie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's your
We've
place?
always had cows. I had a place off 2978 for a while. A land deal that I put together. I ran cattle over there, and then I ran over on Decker Prairie Road.
Are you anywhere near the Michaels place, or are you closer in to?
North of the Michaels,
All right.
north of the Bradigams. Bradigam was a south neighbor. And
So I had this map. We could hold it up to the camera, but roughly where was your place on there? You want to put a mark on there?
yeah. Our place would be right in here. Grandfather's place was right in here. That's pretty close there to his place. He was bound on the east on Peden Road, on the south by Decker Prairie Rose Hill Road, and on the north by Decker Prairie Road.
So just a little bit west of where.
West of Decker Prairie, yeah. Little community. Had a road on 3 sides of it. That house home tract there was, I think, 177 acres in that little piece. But he had other properties, but they weren't all contiguous, you know.
You know if there's still some fairly historic houses up in that area?
Well, my grandfather's house still there. He built in 1895.
Is it located near that tract or?
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And his name was, remind me again.
M.H. Montgomery Hampton.
And any other older houses you remember out there?
Well, the old Bradigam homestead is still out there too. Edward E. Bradigam, and I think, let's see, what was the first old man's name? Fred Bradigam. He was the first one in there. That old house is still there. It was built in the 1800s too, brother.
You remember where the Coes came from before they got to Jamestown area?
Yeah, they come from England. I don't remember exactly the name of the town. Suffolk. And they lived there, goes back to 1400s. There's a historian named, this guy named Robert Coe that's done quite an extensive background on them. And I've got some of that stuff at my office. I don't remember the actual address.
How about the Deckers before Canada and Michigan? Do you remember?
I don't know where they come from. I got an idea he was from Germany. Just kind of think he might have been.
So there's a lot of the Tomball families had the German background,
Yeah.
and intermarried a lot of the German families. But are the Coes married to any of them? Remember? You know much about the Goodson family?
They were. You heard of Lester Goodson Pontiac?
Uh-huh.
He was one of them. And Aunt Kate had another brother. His name was Tom Goodson. He had been the city of Houston police, head of the police in Houston at one time. The city of Houston. His name was Tom Goodson. Of course, the Cotton Goodson, he was in the construction business, dump trucks and so forth. There was a good many of those Goodsons up there.
When I was a kid, there was a big Goodson place up near Pinehurst. Just
That was
before you get-
Lester's. Lester had 1,100 acres up there. He called it the J.A. Ranch. Goodson J.A. Ranch, which is now High Meadow Farms. That's been developed into that. Yeah, Lester, he was a racehorse man. He loved racehorses. He had cattle horses. But Tom got him off in that car business down there in Houston, I'm sure. That's where he made his money.
So Arvid Coe, the junior, was that your cousin? So he
Yeah,
was your
been
cousin?
Daddy's first cousin.
Okay. And what all businesses did he have around Tomball? What kind of businesses did he have around Tomball?
Harvard? Well, he had the lumber company, and then he had the Tomball Ready Mix. And he built a lot of houses back there in the 50s, early 60s, up and down quite a bit around town. And then he got off, we developed that land up there at Pinehurst, and he got off in the water business. Had to put a water system in there for the people, and his communities around went to development everywhere. People put in a water system, they'd give it to him to run it. And he accumulated quite a bit of those things. He sold it to a co-op for several $1 million later. You know. Then he kind of retired.
Did y'all have some Coe or Decker get-togethers back then?
A few, not too many. People get scattered off, so it's hard to get them all together.
Yeah.
Last one I remember of any consequence was in '93.
So what kind of house did you grow up in? Was it something like this, or what
Now,
type of
hell,
house?
that old house that I remember as a kid, when Daddy moved that old shotgun house in there. We lived in it to about 50, and then we built a frame house there on Raymond Street. It was a 3-bedroom, just had one bath. Nice old house, you know, but it doesn't have central air and heat. Built right after, after the war, but before they put much central air and heat in them. Daddy never just did. He put some wind units in it. It was a nice house, though.
So how did the war affect people around Tomball?
Well, we lost 9 men. I've got a memorial here for those boys. They left high school to join that stuff. A lot of them didn't get back, you know. But war effort was, working in the oil field, that was a big deal because you got to have petroleum products to make everything you need. Tires, and fuel.
I guess they didn't have any public transportation around Tomball back then, did they?
No, sir. Sure didn't. We only had one, when I was a kid, wasn't no city marshal, nothing. You had one law, Mr. Allie Tice, the old Tice house next door. That's some of his heirs. He was a constable. Then they had a sheriff. They put a sheriff out here, Mr. W.C. Browder. You remember him?
I remember that name.
Remember the name?
Broward?
Yeah, W.C. Browder. He was a good guy. He sponsored the baseball team when we were kids. We'd play in hardball, We'd go to Baytown and play. We'd go to Houston. We had to go all the way around. There wasn't no little towns around here. Tomball's only incorporated city in North Harris County. To this day, ain't no other incorporated towns here. Spring, just a community. Klein was a community. Decker Prairie community.
So, I've heard of like the community of Egypt.
Yeah.
Was there much there when you
No,
were younger?
very little there. There was an old store down there. I can remember going there with Grandpa. He could buy, he sold a little feed and stuff, you know. And there was a little store over here on Hardin Store Road, old Conroe Road. There was a little store there. But you know, things weren't developed very much then.
What was at Decker's Prairie? Much?
Otis Laird had a store there. He was on the right-hand side as you're traveling north. It was where Hardin Store Road used to peel off to the right. And he was wide in there, and he was right there. If you were coming down Decker Prairie Road, you looked right into his store if you looked across the highway. And they had you know, a lot of times, like in those days, the family would have a store. They'd live there, part of it was store. That's the way his was set up. But it had everything you needed. Had notions and meat market and vegetables and gas pumps out there, the kind with the big bulb, but you pumped your ass up in it. And you wanted 5 gallons, you switched to that graduate, and you just all gravity flowed in your vehicle, you know.
It's the one with the glass top.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have one right behind this building here
Right.
at the museum.
Yeah. That's replica, just exactly what it was.
Was there anything else at Decker Prairie back then you remember?
Mr. Kruger had a blacksmith shop there. And that's the only 2 things I remember being there. Till Arbor and them built that sawmill, they put it right in that Y. And it burned down.
About how long did they run the sawmill?
I don't know how many years they ran that. Wasn't too many. That's what after they come out of military, after the war,
So
around 1950, that area.
I've heard that Mr. Nidek had a sawmill out there near his pond, right?
Yeah.
Near his lake, Nidek Lake.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know any others that had sawmills around the area?
Swineley had a sawmill
Where was that roughly?
up there where Stagecoach Farms is now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They had a mill, and then of course in Magnolia, Grogan's had a big mill there. Grogan Lumber Company. They had a regular mill town. So paid the people in script.
They could use a script to buy stuff at the company town?
Commissaries.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Company store.
You remember any families that lived up there?
Yeah, a few old names there around Magnolia. Graves, Glasscocks, Bradburys, Goodsons, Smiths, Toby Smith. Toby had a little sawmill at one time.
I heard the name Elmer Walline, I think, when I was a kid.
Yeah, Elmer and Ed Walline, he had a little mill right across the creek in
Was
the
that-
Huffsmith area.
Up northeast of Huffsmith? Right there?
Well, just due north of Huffsmith,
Okay.
off that Huffsmith Dobbin Road.
So I was curious about the Wallings sawmill up there where we were talking. Did they have like a narrow gauge little rail line or not? Remember?
There was a tram road, a narrow gauge train road that went through that part of Montgomery County. Ackerman runs through what is now the Woodlands and crossed the old highway. Probably went on into Conroe towards that direction, old Conroe Road. But I can remember seeing where that tram road was, and that was all open range when we were kids. We used to go through there. Some mayhaw ponds back in there. We'd go up there and get those mayhaws.
What are those?
It's a berry. It grows in them swampy areas. And when the berry fall off in that water, you could scoop them up, or something. They made jelly out of them and so forth.
I've heard of mayhaw jelly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a narrow gauge track through there. But the tracks were gone when we went through there. Every now and then you'd see where a big rock or something had fallen off of it, About the only way you knew where it went through there.
Any other sawmills around you recall?
No, I don't recall any other mills.
How about blacksmiths? How many, or where?
Well, you know, Mr. Freilich had a blacksmith place out there, Rose Hill.
What do you remember about his place?
Man, that place, that old building's still there. But he made me a brand back in the 60s. He was still active, and I think he was wasn't he involved in this deal?
The museum, yeah.
Yeah.
He helped us put together the
Yeah,
barn.
Norman Freilich.
Yeah.
Yeah, his grandfather, you know, had that. But you know, in that old store, they said he used to do, back in the horse and buggy days, a place where you could sweat a wheel on a old wooden fire, you know, wooden framework and all that old stuff's still in there. I guess still in there to this day.
Yeah, I heard he made buggy wheels there, and
Yeah.
before that they made coffins in there, I heard.
Did it?
Yeah.
Could have. You know, he ran a little hardware store there too. You could buy stuff. And he knew his stuff. He's like Lester Neidig. Lester Neidig had a hell of a hardware store here. Anything you needed, he had it. And it was quality. He didn't sell junk, you know.
That was nice.
Wasn't cheap, but it was good.
That was Neidig Lumber here in town.
Mm-hmm. Lester Neidig, yeah. Yeah, he bought that lumber company, I think, from Harvard. From Harvard, he decided to go in the ready-mix business.
So there was a lot of farms around, still a lot of rural communities around here,
Yeah,
right?
when I was a kid, one of the Wunderlichs, he was farming right here in town on this old Jurgens track. And boys in summertime worked for him. He'd pay them $5 a day, 10-hour day, 50 cents an hour. Back in the 50s. But of course you could buy gas for 20 cents a gallon too. Cigarettes, 25 cents a package. Times have changed, hadn't it?
Yep. And I guess a lot of the dairy industry around, I heard there were just dairies all over this country back then, right?
There were more cattle in Harris County in the 50s than any county in the state of Texas. And all dairy cattle, by and large. And there's only one operating dairy I know of now, and that's a Sieber. And when your grandpa started at AMPI, there was dairies everywhere.
So the Sieber Dairy, I heard, is out toward Huff Smith area?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Bounded on the north by Huff Smith, Kirkendall Road. And they own land both sides of that railroad track. They're pretty big landowners. They own probably 400 acres here in Harris County. Right here close. They're good operators. He has a sawmill out there now, that boy does. He bought part of Lester's mill and part of Arvid's old mill. Arvid had a little mill there at Ducker's Ferry.
That's Frank Sieber.
Frank Sieber.
Yeah. I heard he has it out there at his feed store up there, right?
Yeah, he built that feed mill himself. That boy, he's quite an engineer. He no education, just do it. And then got a retail operation. You know, Frank Heaton was his grandfather down there in 1960. They still got that old store too.
Was there anything else you wanted to share about life in Tomball back then?
No, not really, son. It's just a great place. Great place to grow up and live, raise a family, you know.
Yep. Well, we sure appreciate you coming out today and visiting with us on video.
Oh, glad to. Thank you, son. Appreciate it.
Thank you.